Welcome back to the Go Have Good Sex podcast, the show where faith and pleasure finally stop fighting. I'm Angela, the Christian Sexpert, sex coach, truth teller, and your new favorite bedtime devotional. If you're ready to go deeper, check out my resources for couples and individuals, from my free 15-minute coaching consults to spicy but faith-friendly resources like the Marriage Playdate, to my Patreon, where I teach you all the things your church aunties never told you about. And yeah, you know I've got it covered with merch, journals, bookmarks, and everything in between at TheChristianSexpert.com. So whether you're here to learn, to heal, or to spice things up with scripture and sass, I'm your girl, and I'm so glad you're here. Let's get into today's episode, and remember, go have good sex. Genesis 2:24 tells us, "That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh." Unfortunately, a lot of parents seem to forget that verse once we get married, and especially around the holidays. I see far too many Christian couples allowing family expectations and holiday stress to create a tension in their marriage. That's why I'm talking to Ashley Odom-Rodrigues today. She's a licensed therapist, speaker, and educator based in Colorado. Ashley specializes in women's sexual and reproductive health, holds certifications as a perinatal mental health counselor and certified sex therapist, and is currently completing her PhD researching generational resiliency in women's intimate lives. Today, we're digging into boundaries with your in-laws and even your own parents, how to set them, hold them, and protect your peace and marriage this holiday season. Ashley, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's such a great topic. I'm excited.
Yes, I am super excited. Especially because every year it seems like holidays creep up on people and the family drama kind of takes people by surprise. And my thing is like, y'all need to be planning for this. Like, if you have the conversations now before the holidays really get going, you and your spouse can be on the same page and you're not going to get caught off guard. And which is, there's this thing that like it's supposed to be the happiest time of the year, but for so many marriages, it's just stress. So, why do you think it is that this season brings so much tension for marriages and the extended families?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you're spot on with the timing in the sense of like anytime you need to make change, address something, like doing it when you're not stressed is the best way to find like resolution and moving forward. But yeah, to answer your question, I feel like the pressure there's so much pressure on us, I think, particularly as women, as parents, to one, you're overbooked. I had a client once refer to it as like the May, like the end of school year all over again, but it's like
Hmm.
December because you have like, the events, the concerts, the parties, so your schedule's booked, right? So you have less time, you're off your routine, you're not doing things that you usually do to keep you, like mentally calm. Um, and then there's this like unwritten expectation of like being the magic makers. Like we have to create magical experiences for our kids, or with this pressure to create family memories, or even with you and your partner, if you're childless, like that's a lot of pressure to have to create magic moments, which just isn't realistic in general. And not to mention things just keep getting bigger and bigger and starting sooner, and we're doing 18 more different things, it feels like, every year.
For sure. So, we are actually recording this on what is today, November 4th, and Christmas has like already started, I feel like. Um,
Racist. They took the
yeah.
Halloween stuff down like the week before Halloween.
Yeah. Yeah. And like even with my own schedule and calendar, I think we are booked out through like the second weekend in December already. And I'm like, but why?
What happens? It's
So,
here. It-
yes. All right. So, with this busyness and everything in mind, I feel like that busyness is part of what starts to contribute to boundary issues between a married couple with their parents or their in-laws. What are some of like the most common boundary issues that you see in those relationships?
Yeah, I think I see a lot of navigating ways to make sure both sets of families feel pleased, like meeting the needs or the requests of both sets of like in-laws, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And then often I see too, it causes a rift when like a partner maybe will prioritize their parents over their partner, and kind of gets pulled into that direction. And also even just for even newer couples, even sometimes couples who've been together for a while and maybe have kids now, right? Is the blending of the traditions. Like I'm just used to it being this way, or I would prefer it to be this way. And sometimes even within partnerships, like there's just two very different expectations in mind. And neither of them have to be wrong. It's just like, oh, you're used to being really busy on Thanksgiving, and I'm used to like staying in my PJs all day. Like it's just this like two
Hmm.
different life experiences trying to mesh.
Like that really speaks to the conflict sort of between a couple. But um, I'm curious what sort of, when we look at the wider picture with like the parents and the in-laws, where do you see a lot of the conflicts coming with that?
Yeah, I think, you know, parents and in-laws often have expectations of what they want their holidays to look like, right? They have these dreams, they have these visions of, I don't know, waking up on Sunday morning and having grandkids running around in their matching PJs. And there's nothing wrong with these visions, but these aren't often realistic or something that every family can accommodate. And then if you have two sets of grandparents, and some people have three and four sets of grandparents, right? You see where the conflict shows up in the sense of we can't be everything for everyone. Not only can we not be everything for you guys, but we also have our own family values and want to create our own family traditions. Um, so it just becomes truly like this moment of like limiting like physical ability. Like we just can't show up this way.
Yeah. I can't cut myself into multiple pieces and I can't teleport and I can't time travel. And
Totally. You can try to be as diplomatic about it as possible, but there's just no way to make everyone happy. And I think, especially if you are pre-programmed often as the people pleaser or a people pleaser in recovery, like this pressure feels particularly heavy for you.
that's a brings up a really great point because a lot of the questions that I see being raised often are how can I XYZ without making this person angry?
Yeah. I mean, I think the really brutal truth therapist-y answer is that we can't control how the other person's going to react,
Hmm.
right? Like they may get angry. But I think what may make it an easier conversation is being empathetic,
Hmm.
but staying firm, right? Like there's a humanness to this. There's a humanness to your limitation. Like I physically can't do this. We wouldn't hold ourselves to the same accountability if you were like, I can't run a marathon. I physically can't do it, right? Like we don't expect that people are going to be mad at you for not doing that, right? And so, but
Right.
it's so interesting, especially when it comes to the holidays, that we tend to hold ourselves to the standard of like, well, I can't do everything, but you physically can't. Um, but I think often with parents and if there's a culture of people pleasing and appeasing and avoiding conflict of like, I'm just going to do something I don't want to do just to keep you happy. I think this theme comes up quite often.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So with that, how can I do this? How can I set this boundary without making them mad or things like that? The other thing that inevitably follows with that same conversation is people not understanding the difference between boundaries and ultimatums. So,
Thank
can
you
you
for
explain?
The greatest. Thank you for asking this question. This is like a really beautifully thought out question in the sense that I think the beauty of like psychology making its way into social media is that people are now learning things that we maybe didn't have access to. I think the downside is we really struggle because it's social media to sit with things like nuance and we like to oversimplify things. And I think boundaries has become kind of confused with ultimatums. And I
Hmm.
always have to remind people that like boundaries, the whole point of a boundary is to preserve and protect a relationship, right? I think often we think boundaries of I'm going to put this wall up between me and you, and that's not the visual you should have. It should be it's me and you, and we're going to set these walls up around us because we need the walls if we're going to be able to be in connection, in community, like have a healthy relationship with each other. So ultimately, the difference is a boundary is you explaining what you are doing in your behavior that's going to be different. So the person you're speaking to changes nothing, right? They don't have to change anything. An ultimatum is if you don't do this, then this is the consequences, right? Thinking about like maybe like parents tend to do this with our kids sometimes. Like if you don't eat green beans, right? Like if the behavior has to come from the other person. And I think a big piece of therapy work is understanding that, like, yeah, I can sit and talk to you about your mom all day, but like, we can't change your mom's behavior. It's just the two of us sitting here in Zoom or sitting here in this office space, right? Like, she's not going to change because we're talking about her, but we can change how you interact with her. You can change your behavior with her. And those are things called boundaries. And so ultimately, when I think if you translate this into like holidays, right, it's you realizing what you can do and what changes you need to make to create a holiday that feels like in alignment with your family values and letting them know what you're doing. But you don't expect them to change or do anything in that way.
I think because I live in the like sex space so much
Mhm.
that the only example that I can think of right now is with like discovery of a husband's pornography addiction
Mhm.
and the difference between boundary and ultimatum in that. So but I really want people to grasp this because it's not about whether he stops using or not. It's about how you're going to react. So a boundary is I cannot live under the same roof with a person who is in active addiction. So I will remove myself from this circumstance versus the constant, if you don't stop, I'm gonna leave you. If
Yeah.
you don't stop, I'm going to leave you. And the it sounds like the same thing.
It kind of does. And I would say, like, an example, if you want to translate this into holidays, it's saying,
Yes,
hey,
please.
listen, I can come up with a sex therapy analogy for all the things.
I,
I,
I
I
know.
think the example would be like, hey, mom, we are only able to make it to your house on December 26th. We want to celebrate with you on December 26th if you can accommodate us, as opposed to, hey, if you don't move the fifth, like we're not going to come on the 25th. We need you to move the thing to the 26th. You're not expecting her to change her behavior. You're not expecting her to change the family traditions. You're not expecting anything from her beyond asking her if you can come celebrate with them on the 26th. Can you or not? It's okay if you can't, but we can't come on the 25th, right? Like you are saying, this is what we're available for. Is this something you can accommodate? I get like it may not be the full whatever, but this is what we can do. And I really like, especially if you think about like physical limitations of being in all of the places.
Yes.
We just can't. Like, I can't physically get there. I want to celebrate with you, right? And I love that because it preserves the moment of like the whole point of this boundary is that I want to celebrate Christmas with you. I just can't do it on the 25th.
Yeah,
Um, and seeing if they're able to accommodate. If they can't, that's okay. It doesn't mean that you're changing your boundary. Does that make sense?
absolutely. Thank you for helping me translate that into what we're actually supposed to be talking about.
I love it. I mean,
Because
we'll go
my,
back to
yeah,
therapy later.
My brain was like, you have no examples, only sex. That's it.
Totally. Totally.
Okay, but this brings up a really great point because one of the things that is often taught in a not healthy way in evangelical circles is this idea of we have to honor our mother and our father.
Mm,
And so often that is taught as you have to do what they want you to do.
mm.
So, can you speak from sort of a psychological perspective of what it means when we're honoring someone? And does that mean that we have to do it, you know, she wants me there on the 25th, so I have to do it?
Totally. Well, I mean, I'm like, stick to what I am, what I know. Like, I am not a theologian, so
And that's
I
why I phrased the question as from a psychology standpoint.
totally. And I say that to invite you in the sense to say, like, if you can think of like biblical phrases or passages that could back this up, that would be
Mhm,
great. Maybe not. Maybe I'm just taking a shot in the dark. But I think from just my experience with work that I've done with clients is I think we tend to misinterpret what the word honor means as like complete obedience.
mhm,
And sometimes complete obedience isn't honoring to families. Because ultimately, and especially if you've gone on to get married and have kids yourself, right, you have your own family. And I imagine, and this is kind of where I say, I imagine there's biblical verses that
mhm.
talk about being a leader in your family circle and establishing a family culture that is reverent and sacred and all of these beautiful things that you want to carry on. But in order to do that, you have to shift the focus from your own mother and father to your own family. And the way this shows up clinically often is it's called enmeshment in the sense that like I can't do anything outside of what my mom and dad tell me to do as a grown adult, which is a level of dependency on one another, which is mom and dad depending on their kids to fulfill their lives, and kids kind of abandoning their own families in a sense or their own partners to meet this need of their mom and dad. Um, and I and I think that's where I struggle to view that behavior as honoring because it's not healthy for the child. It's the adult child. It's not healthy for the parents. Um, if this is a dynamic that you're like, is this in my family? A really great resource is, oh my God, I hope I can remember. It's called Calling Home. And a therapist, a friend of mine from Miami, runs, it's like a support group. And it's a lot of millennial adults kind of grappling with what their relationships with their parents look like. Um, and it's a really nice resource just from the clinical perspective of like, is this relationship with my parents truly healthy? And sometimes we can default using that like honor thy mother and father as this like scapegoat to be like, well, I'm honoring them. And I'm like, well, not really, because you're kind of sabotaging your relationship in the long term if it's not a healthy connection.
I fully agree. And to respond to your invitation for like biblical citation, it is not honoring someone to enable toxic and bad behavior. It is not right because I mean, quick and dirty theology. The Bible says that we
My
are
favorite.
there's a lot of things quick and dirty on this podcast, including the theology. Um,
Amazing. That's your new tagline, by the
I
way.
know. The Bible says that we are to be as iron sharpening iron for other believers. So, especially if your parents are Christians, that means that you do not allow them to sit in their bad behavior and their sin. You do not allow them to disrespect your marriage because as I said in the opening of the podcast, Genesis 2:24, that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife and they become one flesh. So, if your parents are not honoring your spouse, you don't enable their bad behavior by saying, well, I have to honor them and do whatever they want me to do. And there's also a verse in the New Testament about fathers do not enrage and bitter your children. I'm sure that someone will be happy to correct my misquoting of that, but you guys know the verse I'm talking about. I just can't quote it off the top of my head, okay? So there is also that verse as well.
Comment section. Go, go, go.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I just really struggle from a clinical perspective to see how enabling unhealthy connections and then setting that pattern even for you, like it's a really powerful moment to be able to stop the cycle as an adult and a Christian adult to set the tone and the environment for the home that truly is honoring God. And sometimes that's not catering to we'll call it, bad behavior or, this enmeshed neediness of wanting to raise kids who are empowered to step away and you've raised them as parents to feel equipped to build their own families and to leave the nest and not feel like they have to provide you with, you know, every pomp and circumstance that you've created in your brain.
So a lot of people understand this idea of boundaries. They understand this idea of, we are supposed to leave and cleave and but then when it comes time to actually like say, okay, we're going to come on the 26th, not the 25th, they freeze up. Do you have any practical steps for setting and communicating boundaries?
Yes, and this is great. And I think the timing is perfect in the sense that the same way that you wouldn't approach any tense conversation with your partner when you're in the middle of a fight, like it's not going to go well. You know what I mean? Like if you're fighting about the dishwasher, it's not a great time to talk about like an issue you're experiencing like in the bedroom, right? Like that's not something you would ever recommend for your couples. You always would recommend like this is a conversation you need to have when you're in a moment of connection. And what that's going to do is allow the defense mechanisms to be lowered or give you some buffer before all of a sudden, people put their dukes up of our default defense mechanisms. And so I say start the conversation early. Um, and also, I love the point of when you're setting your boundaries and when you're figuring out what you want to do for the holidays, make sure it's rooted in your values as a family, right? And I keep saying family, whether you have children or not, like with you and your partner to say, like, what do we want our holidays to look like? What do we value? And as long as it's anchored in something deep, um, it's going to give you such a stronger foundation to stand on as opposed to it being like, well, you drive me crazy every year and I don't want to do it, right? Like, no, like have it anchored in that, like, we want to have a slow Christmas. And a slow Christmas isn't getting kids in the car. Like, we want our kids to learn how to savor small moments, right? Like, figure out your why. Once you figure out your why, find the right time.
But
Early.
don't perfect time it.
Yeah, like just find a moment when like it's just genuine connection, when you're actually just kind of shooting the shit with your mom and it's you're actually agreeing on something and it's fun and it's light and say, "Hey, listen, I want to talk to you about Christmas. Here's what we've decided using a we family alignment. We really want to prioritize insert family value. And because of that, we're not going to be able to show up Christmas morning at your house. Um, we might be able to come in the evening or the 26th, right? You're offering other options. So you're establishing what your boundaries are when you can connect. If that's something you guys are, willing to host us for, um, you can use empathy. I think oftentimes when we're in this like I'm going to set my boundaries and be a strong girl, we can't use empathy, but I think empathy is just a really powerful way to diffuse defense mechanisms to say like I really want to be able to do all the things at once, but we can't make this happen. um and that's it. Their response at that point, like you've led with your heart, you've led with empathy, you have led with an intention of wanting to connect with them. in the sense of, even if it's a conversation, right? Like say, like, my parents and my partner's parents don't live in our town. So maybe like, we're not going to be there at all this year. I'm really sorry. Like, I'm sorry. We're going to prioritize seeing you guys, blah, 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 blah. Right. Um, might set a better foundation as opposed to it coming from a place of like irked, um, building, feuding. Um, yeah. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, but it leads to, 17 more.
Totally,
So
as it always does.
so you mentioned talk to your spouse and decide what your values are around the holidays. Well, I just encountered a situation where someone was asking for advice about holidays where because her in-laws treat her poorly. It's not that she wants, the kids to have a slow Christmas morning at home. It's that her mother-in-law and her sister-in-law are disrespectful to to her as an individual. And her husband is feeling caught in the middle because, it sounds like he just doesn't want to rock the boat. Um, so how can, where there's already some established contentious feelings, how do you have any advice for navigating that?
Yeah, I mean, multiple thoughts here. I think first and foremost, I think it needs to be led by the partner, oftentimes. Yes, using we statements, but I think when one partner is made to be the villain, is made to be the outsider, is being made to feel less than. If you look at things from a power and I'm always kind of looking at things through power of influence, but like she's at the bottom of the totem pole when it comes to power and influence. So while she may have the best intentions in wanting to speak up for herself, if the family hierarchy has her so far down on the totem pole, like it's not going to be very effective. I think the more effective route in this scenario would be partner speaking up and being willing to ruffle some feathers if need be. I think where the family values in this scenario comes into play is this an environment we want to be in? And the answer is not as simple as like, well, it's abusive, so absolutely not. No, not necessarily, right? There may be a moment of like, yeah, but it's an incredible environment for our kids to be in this environment. And this is, like it's not every interaction's that bad. And I have really great connections with other members of the family. And so it's nuanced. Let it be nuanced.
Hmm.
And wherever the couple lands, as far as like these are our values, we're gonna go. These are the values we're going to stay home. We're going to go, but just for a short amount of time because the longer they're together, or if there's alcohol involved, or you know what I mean? Like you can kind of get creative in this place, but I think if there's any boundaries that need to be set in that context, I would always encourage the partner who has, like the higher family stature power, which is usually the like direct descendant of that family.
That's really interesting because normally the advice that I see is he should deal with his parents and she should deal with her parents, but it isn't always the um, direct descendant that would necessarily have the higher stature.
Totally. And I'm sure there'll be probably another sort of person who listens and disagrees. But I think typically, like moms and dads see their kids as perfect all the time. And so typically it is the direct descendants that have more influence. But that's not always the case. You're absolutely spot on. But I think a different lens to look at it might be, who holds the most influence in the family. It's also an interesting way too to say like family dynamic if mom and sister-in-law are causing issues, but dad holds the most power and influence in the family. Like, what would a conversation with the son and the dad look like around his wife and his, daughters or daughter-in-law's behavior? Might be an interesting route, creative route in this scenario. Um, yeah. Power dynamics are interesting and always at play.
And sometimes they're more kinky fun than others. Um, I was editing, guys,
Here we are again.
guys, right before I got on this podcast, I was editing content for my private Patreon community, which is you get early access to my podcast, but then I also teach the spicy stuff that I can't teach on the regular socials. So I was editing very sexually explicit content right before, and my brain is obviously struggling to make the switch. So thanks for staying for the bonus content today, I guess.
We'll call it continuity of brand.
Yeah. Um, but okay, so I want to stay with this specific idea for a moment because what if her husband remains unwilling to set boundaries with his family?
Yeah.
Where does that leave her?
Yeah, this is tough because I think obviously, ideally, there's a power in the we. But
Mhm.
if the we is not on board, and it kind of goes back to that place of like you can sit and talk about whomever with your therapist, but it's not going to change their behavior. Um, I think that's when she has to set her own boundaries, right? Your circle gets smaller in that sense of like, I've really tried to set boundaries as a couple, as a family, and it's not working, or I'm not being heard, my needs aren't being met. So what do I need to do to protect myself in that sense? So I would say in this example, like she needs to decide what role she wants to play in this family dynamic. And maybe that is a role of not going. Maybe that's a role of only being there for a little bit. Wherever she lands, it's hard. There's a lot of, I think, grief in it and feeling like, then the boundary becomes to your husband. Hey, I cannot go. I can't go. I can't be around this environment. Not on Christmas Day. And it's not an ultimatum. It's her saying, I can't go. What do you need this to look like? What do you want this to look like? Because I'm not going, right? It's not, I need you to do da 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 da. Da. Oh, I really want you to go though. If I talk to them, would you go? Maybe, or you know what I mean? Like it's a boundary. I can't put myself in this environment. That's what I am doing. What you do is on you. I'm not
Yes.
asking or requiring change from you, but I can't go with the dynamic the way that it is.
Which leads us to kind of the aftermath of boundary setting that sometimes happens because especially like in the specifics, like if we keep with the scenario, it sounds like someone is going to be mad, whether it's, her in-laws are mad that she's disrupting tradition by not going, or, there could be an accusation that, well, she's keeping little Johnny from us. She's the problem. It could be her husband gets mad because he doesn't want to rock the boat and blames her as the one who isn't falling in line. Um, so how should we respond when boundaries are met with guilt trips or manipulation or just kind of emotional fallout?
Yeah. It's a tough one because I think one, normalizing the fact that it is never easy to internalize less than ideal, toxic, harmful, hurtful behavior from your parents, right? Like, I think as children and the parents in the scenario are still children in the eyes of their parents, like you don't ever grow out of wanting to be loved and accepted by your parents, right? And so I think one in normalizing that, oof, this is particularly hard. It's not the lady at the gas station getting mad at me. It's my mom. And that hurts. Um, and I say that and leading with the kindness of self because oftentimes it feels a little bit of like autonomy and empowerment to say like this feels heavy because it is, not because you're weak. And then I think on a practical sense, right, if behavior is going to continue to cause harm and continue to create more space between you guys, you can either A, choose to approach it and talk about it and say, hey, like when you said that, that really hurt my feelings. Um, if you think that that person has the capacity to manage the conflict, to be remorseful, to acknowledge a role that they're playing in this relationship not being what either party wants it to be. If they're not capable, then I think also there's the option of saying, well, is there am I missing boundaries? Do we need more boundaries so we can have a relationship still? Because this is looking like the boundaries like are there's not enough. You know, we've given ourselves too much space um, to kind of mess this up. I always like to say when it comes to making boundaries, I kind of love using the flag system. So a red flag would be a something so absolutely absurd cannot be ignored, and there is like an immediate need for a boundary, right? It is like a holy crap moment. We can't, this could never, ever, ever happen again. Immediate boundary. I also love using the yellow and orange flags because I think often boundaries or the need for boundaries kind of sneak up on us and we don't realize it almost until it's too late. And not to say that like anytime your parent makes a mistake or your in-laws mess up, all of a sudden we have to be like, well, we can never, you know what I mean? Like I have to set all these boundaries when it's like, well, I'm sorry, my bad. Like, I'm trying to think of an example. So like maybe
Oh,
you witnessed a moment of like your father-in-law kind of like guilt tripping your kid into giving him a hug. And you're like, I don't love that. Don't love that. That's for me like a yellow flag. Um, but it was like consensual. Like she gave him a hug, but after being guilt tripped. I don't love it. Great. Okay. It's not necessarily an immediate boundary, but maybe it's a conversation of like, hey, like, not like it's okay to not want a hug right now. Like, let's maybe not guilt trip. Like, it's cool. And maybe there's a change in behavior and there's no need for a boundary. I like the flag system because also like you can communicate with your partner like, oof, this is a yellow flag that I saw from your mom today. And it's not this like naggy moment of like, oh God, what's the next thing with my mom? Of course you did. It's calling it what it is. Like it's like I saw a thing I didn't love. And then when there's enough of these flags, then that may be a conversation of like, all right, like maybe we do need to set a boundary here before it gets to the red.
one of the things that I see is that has been coming up a lot in my feed lately is um, this idea of I'm going to say boomer parents saying that they're being punished by, by their children for making mistakes.
Hmm.
And what I'm really hearing from you with this flag system and is it's not boundaries are not a punishment for a grown adult making a mistake because I think a lot of um, the younger, our generation has like is able to recognize that they weren't taught better, they don't know better.
Yeah.
And there's like a limitation in their knowledge of psychology and developmentally appropriate behavior and their own boundaries and things like that. I think it's are they willing to learn and grow
Yeah.
versus, doubling down, tripling down on their accountability and responsibility.
Yeah. And I think this is a beautiful middle ground and nuance to set the boundary, right? To say like, which is why it's designed to help enable relationships to continue in the sense of like, I'm going to give you a chance to grow. I'm going to give you a chance to evolve. You know, like I have faith in you that you can show up as my parent and like make this change, even though it's making you uncomfortable. I'm making changes and making me uncomfortable too. I'm having this conversation. I don't want to have this conversation with you, right? Like we're all pushing ourselves to grow and change. And I also want to normalize too, like when it gets to a point where you sometimes like there's a lot of grief that comes with boundaries. There's a lot of grief from the person setting the boundary with their parents of like, it makes me really sad that like you're not able to meet me here. You know what I mean? Like you can't evolve with me. Like it's been very clear. I use the analogy with my clients a lot who are either not contact or just really kind of grieving limitations of their parents is like, like imagine like the relay, like at the Olympics, right? Like when they do the relay race, like one person's running like super fast and they don't stop running and pass the torch. There's a moment where like both partners are like running together so like they don't have to lose momentum and they pass the baton. And then what does the first partner do? They eventually slow down and stop running while the other partner like keeps going. And this is like a symbol moment that I like to use for generations passing in the sense that like there is a moment where like our parents are like, I've evolved and grown so much. And there was a moment when we were growing and evolving together. Some people are blessed with parents who will run alongside them for as long as humanly possible. Some people get the parents who can't. And they've passed the torch, but like our job is to keep going. But there's a lot of grief when you're running and you look over your shoulder and you're like, dang, like you stopped running.
I think this is a great time to bring up a concept that I was given to me by my own therapist at one point.
And I'll just
There
use
is
stuff,
a
don't
there is a difference in who the reality of who the human being actually is and
Mhm.
your idea of who they are supposed to be in your life.
Yeah.
And I think when we are talking about boundaries and our parents, that grief often comes when we are truly unable to stop ignoring the limitations of who they actually are compared to who we want them to be.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some of that grief
And
is really activated.
I would even make it more extreme in the sense of like, well, we need them to be. Like
Yeah.
we're grown, but like I still need that support. I work a lot with postpartum moms and there's nothing like there's just something so visceral and like wanting your mom right after you had a baby. Like I don't care what superhero, like people who I've worked with clients whose mothers are like, they've not talked to in years and are like, how could you ever? And it's like they have that baby and they're like, I can't stop thinking about my mom. Like we just have to like we always forget. Like there's just something so human in longing that for that connection. And there's really nothing wrong with it. And you know, I, the conversation shifts from boundaries to grief because they do move hand in hand.
Yeah. So, how can boundaries actually strengthen a family relationship?
Yeah.
How do we shift from this grief and frustration into, hey, this can make us stronger?
Yeah, I think if you think about if you're going from like the extremes, right? Like, so if maybe you are in a kind of enmeshed relationship and you're setting boundaries to kind of sever that connection, it gives permission for the relationship to evolve. And we know that long-term relationships that can evolve and change are stronger, right? The same way, I don't remember, was it Esther Perel who has the quote of like, everyone has 5 marriages in their lifetime, but if you're lucky, it's to the same person in the sense that like the person you meet when
That
you're
sounds
dating
like
is
her.
the
Yes.
person that like, when you have kids and then midlife and like, you have to evolve and grow and change. And so boundaries give us this beautiful container to grow and evolve and change the relationship. I also like to say too that boundaries get to be fluid. So like you set a boundary now and then you realize like, oh, well, like my parents have really demonstrated that that's not necessary anymore. You can always reevaluate and remove this boundary. And then maybe you're setting a boundary in this other area. So it allows your relationship as like parent to child and adulthood to evolve and turn into something else. It's new. We don't know what it's on the other side sometimes. But it can be a really beautiful, you know, hopeful future at some point.
Okay. Now we are legitimately going to talk about sex on purpose. How do you see this sort of bigger concept of extended families and boundaries and holidays and things impacting couples' intimacy and sex lives?
Totally. As a therapist, I get a ton of influx of clients wanting to meet after the holidays to like debrief. And I will say the theme is often like guilt and like everyone feeling like they backslid like from all the work they had been doing. And I like want to normalize it to say like it's really normal when you step into an environment where people see you as still 17, 15, 14-year-old self to like literally kind of feel like you've regressed. And like don't underestimate the influence of the environment that you are in. So I think it's really common during the holidays, especially if you're with family day in and day out for intimacy. At least sexual intimacy sometimes feels really out of reach because if, you know, especially in like a Christian home, right? Like the thought of like having sex with your partner in your parents' house, it literally makes people want to like dissolve into flames, right? Like it's just so far away. And I think acknowledging where you're at with that, like heading into the, you know, into like 2 nights at your parents' house, just so your partner is like aware, like, listen, like it's so not you. And finding ways to connect intimately, either emotionally, but even physically too, right? Like it doesn't have to be intercourse. You can just have a nice makeout in your childhood bedroom and still feel connected and fulfilled with your partner and on the same team. I do think
I
checking,
want to, real quick,
yeah,
normalize both ends of that spectrum because there are also those who really enjoy playing with the idea of sexual, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like no-goes, like
oh, like I don't want to say taboo, but like
yeah, no, it is like
okay,
the
like if people
playing with
say,
yeah,
yes,
like playing with the sexual tab. If like there are some people who are legitimately like turned on by playing with some of the more taboo things sexually. So you could be a couple where the idea of, oh, we're gonna have 2 days at your parents' house. Great. How often can we have sex? Can we, sneak to the basement during the party? Like
totally.
that's okay and normal too. So if you're like,
Absolutely. I'm so glad you highlighted that because
yeah,
it can be a really fun time to explore those things. I mean, the whole point is it to be playful and fun. I would say
right,
the only caveat is like have that conversation ahead of time so you're not like one
please.
walking in like ready to go and the other partner being like, "Are you kidding me?" Like I could never. Um,
Right.
and setting those expectations and finding a place to meet in the middle. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. I okay. Um, you had brought up a point that I hadn't even been thinking of when I like formulated that question of, you know, for a lot of people going to your parents' home is just, turns you into the Sahara. Um,
Fair.
but I'm thinking more along the lines of like, do you see an impact on intimacy and like sexual intimacy if a couple is like going back to our example from earlier where they're struggling with what the boundaries with the extended family look like and there's that's creating conflict between the two of them and how do you see a big impact with that sort of situation?
I don't know if it's necessarily family related, but I think it can be definitely exacerbated during the holidays because if you're in conflict with your partner, sometimes like it's hard to feel like emotionally and physically connected with them at times, especially if that's kind of how you lead into physical intimacy, is needing to feel the emotional connectedness. That's why I really always encourage couples to have a really strong foundation of physical intimacy that's maybe not intercourse. Because if intercourse doesn't feel accessible because you feel really distant from them, you still kind of have this underlying language that's much more accessible, which could just be a handhold or like a really like intimate touch. Um, as this like subtle reminder to be like, this is just a few days. We're gonna get through it. Like what we will get to the other side. And just this like kind of anchor to say like we can weather this.
I think one of the things that I see in that situation is if your spouse isn't feeling like you are their advocate, like they don't feel safe, they don't feel like you will protect them
Yeah,
emotionally. Like, can we let go of this protector provider thing? Like, you're not physically fighting off anybody in your family. But if she doesn't feel that you are willing to emotionally protect her from people, she's gonna have a like that sense of not safe is going to translate to the bedroom.
totally. I mean, if you aren't feeling, you won't feel safe, you're going to withdraw,
Mhm.
which allows people to shut down. And so you're not going to pick up to cues. You're not going to, you just shut down to survive, to get through whatever holiday hullabaloo is happening. And will 100% impact your intimacy. The good news is that once the holidays settle down, I think one, it gives that foundation of like the conflict is over. So defense mechanisms may feel a little more at bay to have conversations to say, like, whoa, what just happened? And to give partners space to say, like, when you did this, it really hurt me. Um, and being able to kind of rekindle the connection that maybe was severed in the family interaction.
Okay, as per usual, I have a million other things that I would love to discuss, but we are running out of time. And so I want to know if you have a few simple ooh, I want to know if you have a few simple boundary setting phrases that couples can steal this season.
Oh, I love it because why not? Why not have cheat codes?
Yeah. Look, my audience loves a good to-do list.
Amazing. Amazing. I think first and foremost, figure out your plans early and have your conversations and communications early. I think a lot of what causes conflict is expectations, and the longer you let the expectation brew, so to speak, i.e., if grandma thinks she's going to have all of her grandkids in the same house on Christmas morning and you let her think that until December 20th, it's going to be really explosive as opposed to saying, hey, here on November whatever, hey, this is where we're going to be this year. We're not going to make it to your house until whatever. So plan early, figure out your values as a family first, and make sure you're in alignment with your partner if possible, and have the decisions made from there. Um, I think some really great canned phrases is like we really want to celebrate with you this year, but we're only able to insert said boundary here. Another great phrase is like, let's not have this conversation right now. And then like ask them a question about something else if things get political or whatever. Get into a world an
Oh,
interaction.
that's like a whole other can of worms is,
Totally,
the
totally.
things that are actually happening at the events, the
At the event, right?
conversations.
If you get like a question that's going to go south, you can, set the boundary. And then I love the like invitation for more connection if you ask them a different question about something that feels like a safer topic. Um, And then also just really normalizing like saying no and saying like I am so busy this year. I don't have the space for this. And you don't have to explain why. I just don't have the capacity for this year. I'm so overbooked. I'm so sorry. I fully will encourage people to put like those like no phrases in their phone. So when they feel the need to over explain, they can just send the one line phrase and be done.
I think, I don't know why, but you just remind me. The running joke in my friend group is if you are struggling to set boundaries, go talk to Angela because she'll give you the words to say.
Phrases. Yeah.
And because I am kind of known not just in sex, but sort of all the things. I'll just say the thing. And if people get mad, they get mad. Oh well. They can have their big feelings.
Yep.
That's not to say I'm not kind and empathetic. I'm all of those things, whatever. But the point, I have a album in my phone of memes that I have saved for boundary, like related to boundary things.
Yeah.
And I break those out a lot of times when somebody's like, oh, my mom is, throwing a fit about Thanksgiving or whatever. And like, I just send all of these things out of the album. But one of them that I really love says if someone reacts with anger and hostility to your boundary, you have found the edge of where their respect for you ends.
Hmm.
And I think that's a really great thing to bring into this conversation is, if they're reacting with anger and hostility, could be from their own big feelings about things, but it could be a respect issue. Um,
Absolutely. And I would say probably validation that the boundary needed to be set.
that was exactly what I was gonna say, was the other
Right? Like
one
that's
that
your like
goes with
moment to be
it.
like, oh, I was spot on here.
Yeah. The other one that goes with it is if someone reacts with anger and hostility to your boundaries, they have proven that the boundary was necessary.
Totally. If you're like, I don't know if this is overkill and you set the boundary and they're like, okay, sweetie, that's no big deal, then it's like maybe that's a boundary that you can change in the future. But if it's met with hostility, then like, well, you were right.
Yeah. Yes. All right. What is one reminder you'd give a couple who feels torn between pleasing their family and protecting their peace?
Yeah. I mean, it all goes back to family values. Like, figure out what you guys value as a family, the environment you want to create, the experience you want to create for your family. And if your families fit into those values, then sure. And if they very strongly conflict with those things, then I think that would be a guiding place. But the deeper rooted in your decision making, the more confident you will have in setting hard boundaries with other people.
Okay. So your day job, what talking about boundaries, but your semi-day job is doing research and doing therapy with people. And so where can people find you if they want to learn more about your work and what you do and maybe connect with you?
Yeah, so I am a therapist in private practice. I'm still practicing in Colorado virtually. We just moved to Tennessee, so hopefully soon I will be practicing in Tennessee. But I'm also in this really exciting season of my PhD where I'm researching the generational wisdom of women passing down through generations. So if you are interested in participating in some women's sexual health research, I am currently looking for women over the age of 60 who are just willing to have an intimate conversation with me about how their relationship with their body and their sex lives have evolved. And you can find me on Instagram, Ashley Rodriguez Wellness, and Facebook, and then TikTok as well. And then I have a website as well.
And all of those will be linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. What a great topic.
Yes. All right, y'all, go have good sex. Okay, friends. The truth is, boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about protecting what matters most inside of your marriage. You can love your parents, honor your family, and still say, we're going to do things differently this year. If you take nothing else from this episode, remember, you and your spouse are the new family unit. Guard your peace, protect your unity, and don't let guilt have you trading connection for chaos. Thank you to Ashley for helping us navigate these nuanced and difficult, but ultimately necessary conversations. All right, friends, go have good sex. That's it for today's episode. You've been blessed and probably slightly scandalized. Now, go journal, go text your man, and most of all, don't keep this to yourself. Share it, review it, slide into my DMs. Then grab a journal, a game, or a coaching spot. And remember, Jesus didn't die for you to have boring sex. So go have good sex already.